have 2.5 pages of talking points and a little slideshow. This is getting entirely too much use lately. You get one too. Oh.
Call to order this special session of the Milwaukie City Council. In consideration of amendments to the Milwaukie Municipal Code Title 21 and reestablishment of right-of-way usage fees, an ordinance and a resolution continued from August 21st, 2018. The public hearing on the proposed amendments to the Milwaukie Municipal Code Title 21 and the reestablishment of right-of-way usage fees continued from August 21st, 2018, initiated by the city, is called to order. The purpose of this hearing is to continue consideration of the proposed amendments to the Municipal Code Title 21 and the resolution reestablishing rights-of-way usage fees. Does any member of the City Council wish to announce an actual or potential conflict of interest?
No.
No? No, neither do I. Does any member of the audience wish to make any challenge to any council member's impartiality or ability to participate in this decision? Seeing none, we will start with a staff report from Reba.
Well, good evening. Nice to see you all again.
You too. It's been so long.
Yeah, I just want to recap the events so far really quickly. So Title 21 was adopted in September of 2016 by Council with an effective date of January 1st, 2017. Staff spent a considerable amount of time before you adopted the code working with the providers, getting the code to satisfy everybody, and after you adopted the code, a lot of time notifying the providers that the code was in effect. Last month, staff brought you some housekeeping updates to Title 21. Industry did present some testimony before you. It should be noted that most of the testimony that they gave was not concerning any of the updates, but rather language that has been in place since January of 17. So if the city wasn't negatively affected, we did make some changes to accommodate some concerns, and we also addressed their concerns in writing, and I think you have that in your packet as well. So since that meeting, staff has received written testimony from Davis Wright Tremaine on behalf of T-Mobile, the Wireless Policy Group on behalf of Verizon and AT&T, and I believe all of those are in your packet as well. Staff also did a response to Verizon, which addressed the other two concerns as well. So in addition, we also made a couple changes to the proposed updates at your request, the subtitle, things of that nature, spelling utility correctly, stuff like that. So the ordinance itself, it's designed to be technology neutral. It's designed that way so it can be resilient and adaptive. There's going to be a lot of updates to this code as we go forward in time and as technology and legislation moves along. For example, as you know, the FCC has scheduled a hearing on September 26th for the third report and order. If that passes as it's written, it will affect our fee schedule. we've given you a briefing on that, on the effects if it is adopted. The fee schedule is a resolution and can be addressed very quickly at any time that those laws change. Additionally, on August 29th, NATOA, in collaboration with the National League of Cities, published a small cell model ordinance. And I do have that, and I'm working on creating more updates to the code to fit that specific category. Furthermore, we already talked with PG&E. PG and staff both realize that in 2024, when their franchise expires, we will have to do updates to address the unique needs of an electric utility system. We just don't know what they are yet because it's a ways off. So to allow staff to focus on the future developments of legislation, proposed legislation, and developing technology, we did change the late fees. Staff spends a lot of time chasing down late remitters. A lot of time figuring out what that penalty should be. It should be noted, though, that we haven't yet to charge a late fee to anybody. I do have a short presentation on the difference in the late fees for you, because I know that was an area of concern. It should be noted, too, that the late fees, we did add language. The prior late fees that were in the code will stay in effect until December of this year. That gives all of the providers a 3-month grace period to comply without facing any of these penalties. Play. So as you know, we spend a lot of time. It's cumbersome. It's just, this is the process that we go through to figure late fees. We have to figure out 30 days after the quarter. We have to receive the remittance, figure out the actual number of days. It's 9% per annum, compounded daily. The amount's calculated. Then we can start the collection process, because that's what the current code states. And again, these are going to stay into effect until December, so there will be no changes to that till December to allow them some time. It's just cumbersome. This is the new process. If it's late, it's late. The fees are owed. And that's what the new code will state, and it'll be effective January 1st, 2019. This is the difference in late fees. We've always been reasonable in our late fees. Even though they're legally owed, we have not charged them. We're going to continue to be reasonable in the future. That is the comparison on late fees.
Can you put that slide back up? I just want to. Yeah,
that one?
Thank you. Yeah, thank
sure. So as a benefit to the providers, we did do the 3-month grace period. And due to timing, staff requests that this be in effect October 1st, which is the beginning of the calendar quarter. That is the end of my presentation, unless you have questions, which I'm sure you do.
So help me understand, current language, okay, 14 cents a day. Mm-hmm. Proposed language, $12.40 a day. Difference, $22.26 per day.
That looks like a typo by Reba.
Oh, yeah.
That looks like a big typo by Reba.
Oh, okay. Just checking. It's like, all right. And the others are all.
Well, you know, if you see, you know, the third one down there, it's a year late. Staff spent a lot of time chasing these people for a year for 5 cents a day, and we didn't impose any late fees. It is really not worth our time to impose these late fees right now. They're legally owed, but by the time 362 days later we receive the late fee, we have to figure it out, communicate that to the provider, come to an agreement as to when we actually received it, even though it is stamped received in the city, then try to collect a late fee. It's really a cumbersome process.
For that one, it seems minimal, but why haven't we, is this the case for all of them? You're saying we haven't received any late fees, or we haven't imposed any late penalties?
We have not pursued the collection of the late fees that are legally owed.
And is it all because of the effort and time is not worth the value of what is owed, or is there another reason?
There's lots of reasons. That's part of the reason. Another part of the reason is it's a disagreement with the providers. They don't understand the language, so it's an attempt to simplify that as well. We did, one of the providers said, fine, send me a bill, which we don't do. That that's another process that we would have to go through in addition to that, to create a bill, to go send it through the accounts receivable, to get it in. And then if we don't get it, then we have to go to collections. It's just a very long process. It's cumbersome for us and the providers. So there's a lot of reasons, but generally we've been nice, basically, is what it's boiled down to. We've been trying to get compliance and say, okay, look, we understand you didn't understand the code. You didn't understand when you got our letters. We get that. Start complying. Bring your arrearages in. Be current. We won't pursue those, but I have no authority to waive them legally. They're legally owed, but we haven't pursued collection of them because staff and prior leadership and finance felt it was more important to get compliance than to go after every penny that we could. We wanted some understanding and compliance.
What's the total owed right now, would you guess, in late fees?
That's a very hard question to answer because there are so many providers that are not in compliance with us right now. There's a wireless provider that came into compliance last calendar quarter of 17, and their payments, row payments alone, were about $250,000. And they were a year overdue. I think there are other wireless providers in the city that are not in compliance with the city's code that owe about the same amount in ROS usage fees and are 18 months behind, have not paid us for 18 months.
So could you ballpark it? I'm not getting a good sense if it's 20,000 or $1 million or 200,000.
But she's saying it's over 250.
Well, that's the row payments, but then it's 9% per penalty.
It's not the late payment.
Yeah, it's 9% per annum compounded daily. And I understand where you're coming from, and I'll give you a guess, but
that's all I need.
I'm going to say between 50 and 100,000.
Okay. Which seems substantial to me. I like us being nice, but at some point I think that the late fees become unreasonable on our end of not going after these funds.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think that there's a couple of things we're trying to do with the cleanup, and that is to make this a substantially easier process for staff to go through so that we are able to very clearly articulate what the late fees are and then to make those collections. The reason for the delay on the collection was there was some concern after the last meeting that we were doing a retroactive fee. We wanted to make sure that it was clear that our number one priority is to get compliance. Our number two priority is to collect a late fee, right? We want people to pay on time. That is ideally the outcome. We are not planning on being nice as of January 1st, 2019, but we needed to get this into a process that was possible for staff to actually implement.
Thanks.
And when, like your example of the one that came into compliance at the end of 2017, once somebody sort of comes into compliance, do they stay in compliance?
This particular provider did because we issued a code violation to them because they were not complying with us at all. We had to issue the code violation to get them to even comply with obtaining a right-of-way license. So that was a expensive process for the city as well. We ended up dropping the code violation because it's felt that that late fee income is great and that's nice, and we are going to stop being nice. But for the first 2 years, it was great. We could collect late fees, or we can get people to comply and continue paying the public for the use of their property on the quarterly basis on what they're owed. It was also a point of, we didn't want to be mean. We wanted to try and foster a good working relationship with these providers. And that's why we also did the fees not effective till January 1st, but as of January 1st, it's been 2 years. Staff has taken a lot of time. There's a lot of other legislation out there that staff needs to pay attention to. There's the model ordinance we need to pay attention to. There's other things staff needs to do besides chasing these people around and figuring out a 9% per annum compounded daily. And then it's cumbersome.
Yeah.
It's easier to say, okay, you were late. It's this much.
We have not forgone our ability to collect, so if you would like us to be meaner immediately, we are also happy to be meaner immediately.
I do want a clear code. I mean, we all want that. So to the degree that that helps facilitate, but I find it completely unreasonable that some of these providers are not paying or are not in compliance. And I'm wondering, as I'm sitting here, what other tools we have besides a late penalty that they're not paying either.
Well,
to start saying, enough's enough.
We do have another tool, and staff would again like to give a 3-month grace period, and as of January 1st, start issuing code violations. We have that authority. We have that right. The code violations in the code have been in there and been in effect since January 1st of 2017.
Yeah.
They have all been made aware of this code at least 3 times. I think we do need to follow through. I mean, 2 years is long enough, in my opinion. So I agree with you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else?
That's all I have.
Are we asking questions of Dan as well right now while you're up there? Okay.
Hopefully not, but
So I understand that the vote or the FCC hearings in September 26th.
Yes.
Assuming that, is that a vote that takes effect?
Or
when does that occur?
The FCC is its own little independent agency. So if they do actually pass this draft report, if they pass it as written, it has to be published in the Federal Register, which can take anywhere from a week, or in the case of net neutrality, much longer. This order states that once it's published, it takes effect 30 days later. So on the 26th, when that vote comes up, if that passes as written, there's no stays, there's no challenges, we can address our fee schedule very quickly to adapt for small cells.
and there have been a lot of comments filed, including comments by large cities and the National League of Cities and so on, objecting to or expressing concerns with several portions of the proposed rule, and including relating to preemption, relating to fees. So one would hope that the matter would be continued for additional work. If not, if it is adopted, would not surprise me at all that there'd be a challenge too. So we could be looking at a significant period of time before it actually takes effect.
I would assume it'd be challenged, or a Congressional Review Act or something of that nature. It's taking away our authority to govern ourselves, which we have the right to do.
But there is a vote, an actual vote on that date.
September 26th,
It's
FCC
scheduled.
votes.
Now, whether it's
Yeah, they
scheduled
don't necessarily have to.
I didn't know if it was the beginning of testimony that will last 6 weeks or something, or
No.
versus a.
They came out with the
Scheduled vote.
proposed rulemaking, I think, back in late 2017. They always come out with a proposed rulemaking and solicit comments. Then they come out with their draft order. Generally is how but they're the FCC. They,
And again, it relates, other than the fee, potential impact on fees, it really relates almost exclusively, if not exclusively, to introduction of small cell technology, and should not impact existing regulatory structure. It's more looking forward to regulating in the future small cell. And for example, the model ordinance that's has been promoted by the league, that may need to be reworked depending on what issues have come up, those kinds of things.
We actually have NATOA's model ordinance.
Oh, NATOA's as well, okay.
Okay. And then there's also potential congressional action,
Always.
but apparently it doesn't have the support it needs to pass in the competing bills.
There's a couple of bills right now that are being talked about, and they're ideas that have been floated before. We went down and testified about one bill about our preemption on right-of-way. The Oregon League of Cities, I'm very closely working with them as well, and NATOA on the national and federal level. There's always a bill introduced threatening our home rule authority and our ability to govern ourselves. There's always implications. Right now, I believe there's a rumor that there's a specific city in Oregon, not us, but a specific city in Oregon won a very landmark court case. So there is an anti-that city legislation being introduced. That's not really the name of the bill, but there's always threats. There always will be threats. And that's, a reason that we did the code, too, is because we want to be able to be resilient and adaptive, technology neutral. We adjust the fee schedule. If we were in a franchise, that would change. There's no way we could change 65 franchises in 40 days. Changing a fee schedule in 40 days to fit a new law or a preemption, I can bring that to you pretty quickly.
Thanks.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you.
Have we received any correspondence on this matter? We know we have. We've got at least 3 letters that I'm aware of. 4. Okay. Does anyone wish to comment on the proposed resolution? Which I have yellow cards, so I'm assuming the answer is yes. I will recognize those persons wishing to speak, and any questions should be addressed through me. When you come to the testimony table, please state your name and city of residence for the record. Because council has taken testimony on this topic previously, I encourage those speaking to confine their remarks to new information on the proposed ordinance and resolution and avoid repetition and irrelevant information. I will now call those who wish to speak to the testimony table. We'll start with Charles.
Well, I'm not here to speak on this here. I didn't realize that this was a Charles Mays, first of all, Cambius Burgess Farm Company.
The only thing that we're taking any testimony on tonight is this. It's a special meeting.
I didn't realize that, so I'll decline to speak. Okay.
Thanks.
I'm sorry.
Thanks, Charles.
Sorry.
You'll be here next Tuesday.
Just help him find his boot.
I do think that's what it was about. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. All right. Kim Allen.
Thank you, Mayor. With the leave of the council, if I could bring up Donna Barrett as well. She's the general in-house counsel for Verizon as well. We both represent Verizon.
Sure.
Kim Allen, I reside in Olalla, Washington. It's hard to say with a straight face. And I am here on behalf of Wireless Policy Group representing Verizon.
Donna Barrett. I live in Wilsonville, Oregon. I'm in-house counsel for Verizon Wireless.
And so good evening, and thank you for giving us an opportunity to address you on this. As you recognize, this week the FCC issued a significant draft order that put significant guardrails on small wireless facilities in the right-of-way. From fees and process to size and definitions of these facilities, the FCC has addressed it all. As I detailed in my letter, a number of aspects of the fee structure and code in Milwaukee will not comply. I'm providing the council tonight, I have here, some detailed information on small cells that we previously provided to Ms. Crocker in the spring of this year in connection with the OTOA conference. Verizon wished to negotiate a franchise for small cells back in March, but we're told that the gross revenue tax for right-of-way usage for macros that are on private property would have to be paid before she would discuss small cells. Verizon is contesting the application of the right-of-way use fees for sites not in the right-of-way. The case law cited by the FCC this week, when it found that gross revenue fees for right-of-way use are an effective prohibition of service under the Federal Telecom Act, shows the federal court's approach to these types of fees. So we are asking that the city take time now to revise this ordinance and its code to address small cells. When the FCC order goes into effect, the city will have 60 days to approve attachments to existing structures, including poles the city owns, and 90 days to approve new poles in the right-of-way. That includes agreements, codes, and application review through final appeal, or through final approval, including appeal. Fees for the use of right-of-way and attachment to city infrastructure will be limited to the city's actual and reasonable costs. The presumable reasonable fee set by the FCC in the new order is a combined total of $270 per pole per year. This is a dramatically smaller fee than what was proposed in the ordinance and rate schedule. These fees must also be published for all of the public to see. So working them out in a franchise agreement on a carrier-by-carrier basis is not an option under the new order. The fees proposed here are too high for the FCC, and they're too high for the market. We also note that there's new counsel for the city onboarding tonight. We would like to have an opportunity to work with him to evaluate the city's ordinance in light of the new order. This is especially true in light of the citations in the staff response to Verizon's letter, which erroneously referenced portions of Title 47 related to merger and consolidation of carriers in the Telecom Act of 1934, which does not allow home rule states to preempt the FCC, and a citation to a fee section that regulates what carriers can charge their customers, not what cities can charge carriers. We note that Ms. Crocker told you at the last meeting that Nancy Werner reviewed the ordinance before you back in February. She was at the time and is now the general counsel for NATOA. So in an article dated yesterday in a publication called At Ground Level, Ms. Werner is quoted. The article says, the FCC will address municipal processing speeds, costs, and aesthetic requirements to ensure that they do not effectively prohibit the deployment of small cells when it votes on the declaratory ruling and third report and order on September 26th, according to the draft of the document made available last week. The municipal community is already expressing its displeasure with the effort. One of the most controversial sections of the draft order states that a small cell fee is only permissible if it's a reasonable approximation of the local government's objective reasonable cost. That language on municipal fees was of particular interest to Nancy L. Werner, NATOA General Counsel, who said the order basically prohibits municipalities from charging wireless carriers rent for the use of the right-of-way. Quoting Ms. Werner, the FCC has rejected the idea that local governments can receive any rent-type compensation, not only for the right-of-way, but also for the structures that they own within the right-of-way, Werner said. The council that drafted this ordinance and has reviewed this ordinance recognizes that the FCC has put some substantial limitations on this type of fee, the gross revenue fee for use of the right-of-way. So Verizon stands ready to partner with the city to deploy small cells once the city has a code and a rate schedule that will comply with federal law. We'd like to work with staff to share our small cell designs to inform the city's efforts going forward. And to that end, we have the presentation that we provided to Ms. Crocker that was made at OTOA, which contains a lot of photographs of as-built small cells and also the type of facilities that Verizon would propose here in the city of Milwaukie. We're ready to work with staff on a code that will truly be resilient, even after the FCC order is in place.
I just had a couple of follow-up items that I wanted to mention, and one thing is touch. The courts have found that in order to charge for use of the right-of-way, there needs to be a touch of the right-of-way. And currently, Verizon Wireless does not touch the right-of-way. There are no installations of any wireless facilities in the right-of-way. So even before this FCC order came out, my issue with it is that we are asked to be paid because we have macro facilities in your city at different locations on private property, but by virtue of the fact that they're in the city and signals, waves travel through the air to project signals, that's considered use of the right-of-way under this ordinance. And not only that, but we're being asked to pay 7% of gross revenues plus $5,000 in an attachment fee per facility, which I don't know what facility the $5,000 attachment fee applies to, because Ms. Crocker said it doesn't apply to small cells, and we don't have anything in the right-of-way. So I'm not sure what it would apply to if that is in fact the case. And that's just one of the reasons why Verizon has taken issue with the ambiguity in the ordinance and the fact that there is no touch, and it's not clear on what we are being charged for.
We'd like to have an opportunity to work with your new in-house or your new city attorney to try to resolve the legal differences that we have with the way the ordinance is written.
So are you saying that Verizon has no cell towers in Milwaukie?
No, we have cell towers in Milwaukie. None of them are on anything in the right-of-way.
The 7% gross revenue fee is being assessed as a right-of-way usage fee. Mm-hmm.
but we're getting no privilege for that fee. And Ms. Crocker's correct that I did email her and say, hey, my understanding is we owe something under this, but that was from a low-level tax person in Verizon Wireless. I know nothing about tax. I will admit that. We have tax counsel that has reviewed it internally, and when that became apparent to tax counsel, the issue was escalated, which is why we have continued to contest the fee and have not submitted payment for it. And I will also note that back in the fall of this year, as Kim alluded to when she was making her comments, we did attempt to try to, approach the city about entering into a franchise agreement that would address these fees, attachment fees, and all of that. And Ms. Crocker did say that she was not going to take any of that into consideration until these fees were all paid and the arrearages were brought to date. So that is a good deal of the reason why we have not engaged.
So thank you for your thoughtful consideration of this tonight. If you have any questions, we certainly would be happy to answer them.
Absolutely.
I have a couple questions. So when you say that you don't touch anything in the right-of-way, are the updates that we're working on, did they change that language?
No, sir.
Okay. And when you, is it Ms. Allen?
Yes.
When you said that you would like to make sure we have an ordinance that complies with federal law, would our ordinance, if it were passed, comply with federal law today?
I don't think so. I think that there's federal case law out there that talks about gross revenue fees not being appropriate under the Telecom Act as a measure of the use of the right-of-way because they bear no relation to the use of the right-of-way. There's no nexus.
And did Verizon have a franchise before our right-of-way license took effect?
No, because we don't have anything in the right-of-way.
Okay.
Yeah.
And with respect to the vote that's coming up on September 22nd, 26th, sorry. We have no idea when that will take effect or if it'll take effect at all or in the form that it's been drafted. So I guess I don't understand why we would wait for something that may never happen.
Well, and that's what I'm saying. That's why it was important that I commented at the end to say that despite that ever not having come out, our position is the same, that this would not apply. The FCC rulemaking, it just bolsters our original position and the findings that are included therein.
Okay.
They've used the same rationale to contest the gross revenue fee that we would present in contesting the gross revenue fee
If this is,
So our,
if that's, go ahead. If that's settled law, why is the FCC having to deal with this? You said there's case law on this. So if that's already settled law, what's the FCC issue about then?
Well, a fee is only illegal until someone takes it to court and challenges it. And having been alerted to instances of this type of fee being charged, the FCC took a look at it and said that this was not a good indication of right-of-way use impact to the city.
So is there case law on it?
There is. It's cited in the order.
So someone's challenged it?
Yes.
All right. And so why is the FCC getting involved if the courts have already ruled?
Well, case law is never final. I mean, you can have a court, a lower court rule one way in favor of, one party, and then that get appealed and another court rule in a different favor. You can also have one circuit court over here, federal court, rule one way, and another one rule one way. So, I mean, case law, in as much as it's settled, is what the current precedent is. What cases are out there are saying things, and there are court cases that do say that there has to be this nexus, and that it's not reasonable to charge a gross revenue fee. And that's what we would base our contest on.
And is that from the District of Oregon or the Ninth Circuit?
No.
Okay. So in this circuit, there is no case law on that?
Right.
Okay. That's all I have.
So in the staff report, it said that our fee structure was similar to, oh, here we go. Happy Valley, Oregon City, Tiger, Tualatin, and Gladstone. So are you also not paying fees to any of those cities?
We are not.
They're not charging them.
They're not charging them?
One, they're not collecting them. Mm-hmm. And two, we don't have anything in the right-of-way, so I think that they understand that there's that nexus requirement. Because we don't have any facility in the right-of-way, we're not being charged for having a facility for use of the right-of-way.
Even when you're transmission is crossing right-of-ways, obviously.
Yeah, and I mean, it's really as simple as thinking of it as, if you have, a bakery on the other side of the street and I'm smelling the delicious bread from the bakery, am I transmitting something across the right-of-way and using the right-of-way?
Well, I will tell you that I had PGE moved a power pole on my corner, and I had to sign to give them an easement for the wire to come over my property. Not the pole's not on my property, but the wire is just passing
that's your
overhead.
airspace, and you have absolute right to do that.
Yeah, but in terms
how's that different than a cell?
Because it's an
transmission?
object. It's an actual physical presence in your airspace, not just a smell or a signal, a microwave, or anything being transmitted through the air, a sound.
Well, and also the FCC has established itself as has preempted all other authority in governing the transmission of wireless signals. That's not something that's available to local jurisdictions to regulate.
So I have a couple questions. The cell towers that do exist, I assume, have some fiber or something that runs to them.
Yes, they do.
And do those magically get there without crossing any right-of-ways whatsoever?
No, actually, Verizon uses fiber that's already there. That belongs to third parties. We are a customer of third parties, not an operator of our own fiber in the right-of-way.
So you're maintaining that Verizon should be able to profit from the public's property, but not pay the public for that purpose?
With all due respect, Mayor, that's not what I'm saying.
That is exactly what you just said.
Well, what I'm saying is that we pay third-party providers that presumably pay the city to use the right-of-way in the way that the city has designated in the ordinance. Those costs are passed on to us as the customer of those third-party fiber providers. So we are not profiting without having the city get its due. The city has given the fiber providers a franchise to use the right-of-way and lay their actual physical fiber in the right-of-way, and the city does not regulate whose information is going through and what.
It doesn't? Why not? Why doesn't it regulate that? In what?
How would you demonstrate whose information was going through and at what time?
Well, we cut it off and then see who cries. So I'd be curious to know how long you allow one of your customers to not pay their bill before you cut off their service.
Well, certainly if a customer has a legitimate argument with us, we would have a process for resolving that, which is what we're asking for.
It's a pretty straightforward question. If I don't pay my bill for 3 months, do I still have cellular service?
I honestly don't know what the time limitation is for Verizon to cut off your cellular service for non-payment, but I'm happy to look it up and let you know.
Well, as I said, we are not using your right-of-way as a direct consumer. You're purchasing it from someone who's already paying the city, and we are also paying the fees that they pay to you as a pass-through to us, as the customer that's using the fiber in the right-of-way.
Under your logic, just so I'm understanding what you're saying, okay, let's say Frontier owns the actual fiber, and they came and put the physical fiber in your right-of-way, and there's 20 different people, different companies that are transmitting signals through that fiber at one time or another at varying degrees of usage, that they should all be paying the same amount that Frontier paid you for actually putting the fiber in the road?
They pay based on the profits that they make from that fiber being there. From that service being.
But the profit is the profit that you're saying. If we're supposed to pay for use of data, you're saying, if we're transmitting.
Isn't that
data,
how you charge?
Well, yes, we charge by using.
I don't understand why that seems different to you for us.
Well, because we're already paying for the use of the wireless.
I'm already paying for my cell bill. Why should I be charged more for the data I use?
Because it's a different service.
And it's only a different service because you say it's a different service. We're saying that you have to pay us to profit from the use of our right-of-way.
Actually, the fee is written that we're to pay you not what we profit from the use of the right-of-way, but for use of the right-of-way. And to the extent that the other businesses on Main Street here that use Frontier Fiber and run their data through that strand every day are not also going to pay you a right-of-way usage fee in addition to what they pay Frontier, then it's not clear why Verizon would be required to do that.
Why do you think they're not paying?
Joe's Computer Shop that runs fiber that runs its data through fiber in the right-of-way is not paying you a right-of-way usage fee under this ordinance.
They're paying for the service provider, the ISP that's providing them that service is paying.
Correct, as they're paying on the data that we run through that fiber strand as well.
You are the ISP.
No.
In essence, you are.
Frontier is connecting two ends of dark fiber for us.
So then the other piece that I have a lot of curiosity about, your whole argument here is that you're not touching the right-of-way, therefore you shouldn't pay for it. But then you say when you put in small cell, you will be touching our right-of-way.
Yes, indeed.
And you still shouldn't pay for it.
No, we're saying we should pay what the FCC has said is a reasonable rate. And we are prepared to do that.
Well, we're prepared to fight the FCC on that ruling. So
we'd rather be in a more collaborative position.
If the ruling goes into effect, we're also going to comply with that.
Yeah.
Assuming that once it's settled, yes, of course.
Yeah.
We're just saying that the fees that are being asked for need to have a nexus and they need to be reasonable. Right now, as it's currently written, we are supposed to pay $5,000 per attachment fee for what? I'm not sure how that gets calculated because we don't have any attachments in the right-of-way, so that needs to be clarified. Plus 7% of gross revenues for every customer that we have in the city for use of the right-of-way. And we're saying we don't feel like we're using the right-of-way. And if we are using the right-of-way, then what's this additional $5,000 attachment fee for? It's still not clear. And so what we're saying is that we need more time. We're not saying that we don't, Verizon shouldn't have to pay to do business here or anything like that. Verizon was more than willing to pay what it needs to pay to do business in your city. But what we're saying is that it's not there yet. This language is still ambiguous. It is not clear, and there isn't a direct nexus between what the fees are that we're being charged and what we're being asked to pay. And that's all we're saying. We're not saying, hey, you can't charge us anything for anything. We're just saying, this is still not, it's not ready. That's all we're saying.
So our request is for more time to work with staff and the new city attorney.
I don't have anything else.
I think I would just beat a dead horse, so.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I thought you had one more. No?
No,
Okay.
that was both of them.
Oh, okay.
Does staff have any response to the comments or questions raised during the testimony?
Staff does.
Excellent.
Just to be clear, the $5,000 attachments fee is for attachments in the right-of-way. That is clear in the ordinance. Everybody's paid that. If there's a provider that does not have an attachment in the right-of-way, they would not pay an attachment fee for an attachment in the right-of-way. Right. But they would pay the 7% of gross revenue for the use of the right-of-way. It's pretty standard in Oregon. I would just state the facts again that the FCC...
Before you move on from that, do you actually know how many attachments there are in the right-of-way? I mean, do we actually bill them when you're contacting them and trying to get them into compliance? Do we know AT&T has 29 and Verizon has 0, or is that true that Verizon has 0? How much do we know?
To my knowledge, to staff's knowledge, Verizon has 0. AT&T has 0. Okay. AT&T is paying the 7% right-of-way because they're interconnected, which is what makes their system work. It is not their fiber, but that's gross revenue for use of the right-of-way. I know it feels like I've been here for years and years and years, but we're working on tracking that as well through our premium process. Staff isn't aware of anybody that has attachments in the right-of-way except for a private communication system within the city. Other than that, from what I actually went out in the field and looked at these. They are on private property, and we have never insisted that somebody pay for the use of private property. That's an entirely different lease between the provider and the landowner. If it was on the public's land, that is our fiduciary duty to collect fair and just rent for that. The FCC order has not passed.
And I think that point to Councilor Adma's questioning, the FCC may clarify that entire issue about touching the right-of-way, and we're not sure which way they're going to go. It may only apply to small cell and not other kinds of cell. We just don't know. Mm-hmm. And there's no definitive law in Oregon or the Ninth Circuit on it. So there's speculation about what the law may end up being. There's also policy choices about whether a jurisdiction should impose this charge. But there's nothing currently in effect precluding the city from doing what it's been doing.
There's actually a Eugene v. Comcast. It was upheld that Eugene has the authority to impose a tax on Comcast Internet for the use of the right-of-way. And that's through their mobile phones and everything else. They have to pay a 2% gross revenue underneath their business tax. They have always been paying the 7% right-of-way. And Eugene just won that case. It was a very long, drawn-out case in the Ninth Circuit.
It's a little bit different situation, but similar concept.
Yeah. Oregon's always upheld our home rule authority to govern ourselves.
Do you feel there's anything ambiguous about the language in our code?
There's always ambiguities in the code, but within the scope of the changes that Reba's proposed, and she's certainly the one who knows better than I the issues that she's been having to face in trying to administering it, it's a step forward in trying to clarify these things and certainly clarify the penalty structure and the collection structure and other items. Whether it's perfect, probably not, but it's a significant step forward.
It's never going to be perfect.
And the penalties are really, I mean, most of the package is what we would call housekeeping, right? Yep. I mean, the penalties are the one exception, I guess.
Right.
Yeah. Anything else that doesn't fall under the
not in my mind, no. There's, as we talked about before, staff's opinion is most of the testimony tonight and the previous night has been on language that has been in effect for 2 years. It's been challenged by other providers. I have successfully worked with those providers. We have talked through it. They are coming to deploy in our city. As I said before, we actually have one small cell provider who has a rural license is going to deploy in the city, and we have 68 people paying us now underneath the road code. None of them have these questions. It's pretty clear.
One person's housekeeping item may be another person's substantive change. There are some minor changes in here that may be substantive, but they're intended to try to clarify what's been the existing practice and not address a new policy issue.
Correct.
I think is the best way to look at it.
And that was all the comments I had, unless you had more questions.
Does any member of council have any questions regarding the clarification of the testimony up to this point?
I don't have any further questions.
If there are no further questions, I will entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
I'd move to close the public hearing.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded to close the public hearing. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Unheard. Public testimony portion of the hearing on the proposed amendments to Milwaukie Municipal Code Title 21 and the reestablishment of right-of-way usage fees is hereby closed. Is there council discussion?
I'm happy to start. I'm prepared to move forward and vote for this ordinance. I can appreciate the testimony, and I'm glad that you guys came. I think you help. Anytime someone comes and testifies, it helps us. I may not always agree with you, but it helps inform, so I appreciate that. I think that your concerns, well, first of all, the arguments about what may happen on September 26th, I think it is, it's speculative. 6th. It's time to move this ordinance on. We've had this on the docket for a while. So I'm not concerned. And if there are, if it passes and we're preempted and FCC sets rules, we'll follow them. That's what we'll do. I think that we will continue, or at least I hope that we will continue to work with the providers regarding small cell technology and 5G, and maybe 5,000 is too much for per attachment given the technology, and we'll revisit that when the time comes. But I don't think that that's a reason to hold up this particular ordinance.
Well, and if we get this ordinance through, then Reba can start working on that ordinance.
Yeah. I agree with Councilor Amba.
I do too.
Okay. Then I would entertain a motion.
I move for the first and second readings by title only and adoption of the ordinance amending Code Title 21, Utility Service, declaring an emergency and establishing an effective date.
I'll second that.
It has been moved and seconded for first and second readings by title only and adoption of the ordinance amending Code Title 21, Utility Service, declaring an emergency and establishing an effective date. Is there any further discussion?
No.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? None heard. It passes unanimously. Ms. Ober, would you please read the ordinance by title only twice?
An ordinance of the City of Milwaukie, Oregon, amending Code Title 21, Utility Service, declaring an emergency and establishing an effective date. And again, an ordinance of the City of Milwaukie, Oregon, amending Code Title 21, Utility Service, declaring an emergency and establishing an effective date.
Mr. Stoffer, would you please poll the council?
Council President Beatty?
Aye.
Councilor Parks?
Aye.
Councilor Abma?
Aye.
Councilor Falconer?
Aye.
Mayor Gamba?
Aye.
Motion carried 5-0, ordinance 2164.
We have a resolution.
Oh, and then it's the fees. Okay. I move to approve the resolution establishing the right-of-way usage fee for utilities operating in the City of Milwaukie rights-of-way and repealing Resolution 101-2016.
I'll second that.
It has been moved and seconded to approve the resolution establishing the rights-of-way usage fee for utilities operating in the City of Milwaukie rights-of-way and repealing Resolution 101-2016. Is there any further discussion?
Nope.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None heard. It passes unanimously.
You can adjourn.
All right. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
Okay.
It's been moved and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned.